Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. Hello, everybody. Many thanks for your patience while I've been on sabbatical here. We are using all of our energy on the platform and on reaching sustainability, and there has not been much left over for making new episodes. I will be releasing new ones here and there. Hopefully in the next few months, we'll be able to get back to regular programming, but it's all a little bit up in the air right now. The good news is that we do have a fantastic conversation for you today with a visiting artist here in Copenhagen, none other than Nathan Gulick. He was here in town for his solo exhibition at C4 Projects, which was called Waiting Room. We met and had a live recording right there in the space, and it was actually a lot of fun. Nathan is eloquent, he's engaged, and we got a really great podcast out of it. The show is down now, but you can see install shots from the show on the notes page for this episode. Remember also to check out all the great shows on our platform, Cultural Bandwidth. There's a team of great podcasters making original content about art, and I know you're going to love it. There are 2 new episodes of the new show, Future Preservation, recorded live here in Copenhagen, and the Felucca podcast also has an episode out next week with none other than Ed Templeton. Check it out at culturalbandwidth.com. And so, with no further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Nathan. So I figure we should start.
Yeah, let's start.
And starting is the worst part.
Okay.
Just because you got to click in, but thank you guys for coming.
Yes.
Welcome. Nice to see you guys. Hey, people. Welcome. Come on in. For those of you who don't know, I run a podcast called The Undergang Armchair, and I'm also I have started a podcast network with a bunch of podcasts about art. And that is kind of up and working and, under development, I guess you could say. And we do some live events. There's also a program called Future Preservation that's coming, which is also going to be more live events at places like Den Frie and some other art halls around town. So if you're interested, you can check it out, culturalbandwidth.com. There's 8 or 9 podcasts on there. So you don't necessarily have to hear me yapping. There's other stuff too.
That's true.
Yeah, Nathan knows. You can vouch. So go ahead and put that a little closer to your mouth. There you go. Like that.
Okay.
So I am terrible at introductions, so I'm actually not going to do it. I'm going to leave you with the responsibility of doing a short presentation on yourself, just like this is a TED Talk.
Like a book report on myself? Like
pretty much. Like, your education, et cetera, and then I'll come with a bunch of dumb questions afterwards.
Fair enough. My name is Nathan Gulick. I am American.
Are you not sure?
No, I'm sure of that. I just wasn't sure if that was like pertinent information that should be included here.
It's out there now.
Now I can never take it back. I studied at SVA in New York for undergrad, which is the School of Visual Arts, and I had a film degree from there and spent about 10 years in the wind before I kind of came home again to fine art and ended up going to Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles after some work in the film, not film department, film field, film area.
Was that the first plan that you were going to be a director?
A filmmaker. I mean, I still love film and capital F film or capital C cinema. Like I always really wanted to do that, but I think it just, I think the realities of what the film business is, I could never really get my head around. And all the times when I could have been like interning at a studio or something like that, like I was working at art museums. So I probably should have listened to my gut, I was making...
Put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, I was making documentary films and, I worked at the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego where I was living for a time and made a film on one of the artists there. And so I was always kind of like gravitating back towards the fine art world, and probably should have just made a call earlier to dive right into that.
But when you say calling back, does that mean that's kind of where you started in a way, or like where does it?
Yeah, I guess. Well, So, I mean, I always painted. I was a really bad painter, which I think a lot of people start out being.
High five for that.
in their 20s. And even when I was in film school, I was still painting, and most of my friends were actually kind of painters and musicians, and I would say kind of punk artists or whatever. And I kind of decided at one point that I needed to buckle down and get serious or whatever. Like I actually even dropped out for a year of film school to go work at a lithography place. It was a factory. It was really cool. Actually, we printed on these old machines that used to run on steam. There was actually these French machines that used to be steam powered, and like they would chain children to in the industrial revolution. It was really
did they chain you to it?
Metaphorically. But yeah, I just decided that I needed to buckle down and get serious and go back. And I went into film, and I kind of over time kind of gave up that kind of art practice, even though it was, still kind of close to me. Yeah.
That kind of thing is always really hilarious to me. And I understand it completely, because at a certain point I made that choice as well. Yeah. But it's always funny to sit there and be like, yeah, the film world is really difficult and hard, because like you're in the art world. It's not like,
no,
you know what I mean? But
no.
it is a slow realization that you get that like, I'd rather eat shit here than there.
That's right. That's exactly the best way to put it. It's because you're gonna eat shit. You're gonna have to hustle, and it's just which hustle you're comfortable with, and which hustle is worth it to you.
Yeah, and which one makes sense? Like what's gonna happen while I'm eating shit,
right? Is
kind of what maybe makes more sense,
right? And yeah, it's just I think. I mean, I don't know. I think you nailed it. I think, but it's just. I mean, and also like just to make the realities of getting a film off the ground. I mean, I've tried to make a few short films, and collaborating is tough. Just with other people is tough. Then the money is tough, and then you've got this thing that
right. A lot of things have to work out before you can get started.
Exactly.
In a lot of ways,
right.
Whereas you can always make a shitty collage at home.
You can always make a shitty collage at home. That's exactly right. Yeah.
But I mean, I just always find it interesting, those choices that we make, because I've slowly realized the older I get that the less, the more time goes on, the more I just realize how horrible this branch is of how making art and trying to make a living, or trying to, be sustainable, not even call it making a living, being sustainable. Right. But for some reason, we're just like, it's just where we have to be. It's not even really a choice for a lot of people, I don't think.
Right. It's the cliche of calling it a calling. And I think
I don't really mean that either, but I just mean like, for whatever reason, this is like where we gravitate towards.
Yeah.
And can't really get out of, even though.
No, I tried to being a normal person for like a really long time. And like it didn't.
See, and you wasted a bunch of time, right?
I mean, I don't know if I wasted it. I learned a lot. I mean, it actually comes out in my work a lot. Like I was in San Diego, and I think I was like trying exceptionally hard to be just like a normal person, and
failing,
work a job and have a house and whatever. And it just didn't stick. It just I can't do it.
So when did the flip happen? Did it happen before you went to get your MFA?
Well, I mean, we had ended up in Los Angeles because Christina Hendershaw, who was an artist and also my wife, had gotten into grad school in Los Angeles. And this was also still during the, I'm going to give it one last try for film. And a friend was working at a production company and was like, well, if you come up here, I can put you on at this production company. And Christina was going there for school. And so I was up in Los Angeles for this job and for Christina to go to school. And that didn't work out. That ended up being, a kind of tough, but, good learning experience. And it was when I was kind of like
Diplomatically put.
I mean, it was hugely difficult. How can I even be even more diplomatic? But I think it was after that I was just like, well, what do I really want?
Right.
What is it that I really want? And there was a few fits and starts. Again, I'm still trying to make a short film. I was actually working at Otis, where I eventually got a master's. I had started working there, and still trying to be a kind of a regular person and failing at it. And it was really just like kind of enough's enough.
So school is the natural choice then.
I think school is like MFAs are a controversial thing because
now PhDs are controversial. MFAs
so
are just.
I mean, I think it made sense for me because at that point I knew a lot of people in MFA program. I had relationships.
It's the natural thing to do.
Well, and I think just being away from the world for kind of long enough time, that being not current with theory or not even in the practice of reading theory, still kind of having, I don't know, not like a naive, but kind of like direct relationship with art, let's say, like where it was still like kind of reactionary instead of like more studied or academic. It made sense for me, if I was going to seriously do this, to go in. And
did I feel like it was necessary even? Like you wouldn't be able to play the game if you weren't?
It felt necessary to me. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it. I feel like a lot of people who go through MFAs feel ambivalent on the way out, My experience was even kind of weirder because I was trying to avoid debt. So I was like working at the same time. So I went part-time. So it kind of extended and kind of drew out the kind of, it was like a Band-Aid slowly pulled off for 4 years. Yeah.
Regardless of what it said, I mean, say what you will about art degrees. They do surround you with artists.
Exactly. Yeah.
You do learn a nomenclature, and you do have a group of people to work with.
Yeah.
And that's everything.
At the end of the day, for whatever ambivalence I feel about Otis, like I owe being here in a lot of ways to that institution. So
exactly, because you meet people who know other people, and that's just the nature of it.
Yeah.
And I used to get mad at the art world for that, but I just realized that's how everything is.
The networks.
Meeting people who open doors, like whether you're in banking or you're in the art world.
Right.
And what's the difference, really?
One of them has money.
True. But you know what I mean? Like, it's not even just the art world. It's just how it is. And you do need to find a group of people to work with. The idea of the person who paints pictures in the attic and never sees anybody is more or less a myth.
Yeah. I mean, you can be that person, but you'll die covered in your own work, your own film. I was going to say your own shit, but it's the same.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, I mean, it's true. And I think that goes back to like what shit you're willing to eat, like what kind of network, like, cause when I was younger and just couldn't stomach the sort of social professional crossover aspect of it. That took a long time to get over. Cause
pulls a lot of people out of it.
Yeah,
definitely.
So
now it's like one of the funnest things about it in my mind, having colleagues and talking about art and meeting people.
Sure.
I mean, that's literally what this show is, right? I mean, so in that sense, that's like one of the best parts. Slaving away and trying to get someone to pay attention to you, that's not the fun part.
No.
But hanging out with people and talking about art and going to art shows, that's the good part.
Right.
And so naturally you pull together in that sense.
Right. I mean, there's that. I mean, that would be the best part of it. And not to be a negative Nelly, there is the kind of anxiety of going to an opening and being distracted and
I'm so beyond that.
I know.
I don't like. I had that, but I'm too old now.
Yeah, fuck that. You're like,
although I do catch my eyes. Like I'll be talking to someone in an opening, I will just be like, ding, 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 like looking around, and it's true. You do get this like,
yeah, man,
what's going on here? What are we doing? Who's here? Like,
I think it's just part of it. I think it's just. And it's funny that, I mean, that art events attended mostly by other artists become that kind of thing. I was just at an art fair and it was like an art fair just for artists to come and chat.
We got to have something, like you got to throw a bone somehow.
A nice day out. No outsiders.
So what happened? You were like, if we're gonna switch subject here,
Sure,
you were a bad painter. Those are your words.
I was, yeah.
And
Radical honesty.
And then you somehow got into an MFA program.
I somehow got into an MFA program.
Did you get in on bad paintings?
No, I actually got in on like mediocre photographs.
Okay.
So
A step up. A step up.
No, what I had done before that, kind of also reckoning with Los Angeles, and I think Los Angeles is part of the brief here that I've been commanded by C4 to talk about what it's like in Los Angeles. But part of when I was trying to get back into a practice of making work and making art, one of the things I had done to kind of get out of my own head is I had made like an anonymous Tumblr at the time and started this practice of trying to take a shot and post it without editing it or without thinking about it too much. And the kind of game was that I would just take it and post it and try to do at least one a day. And so I had started doing this. I didn't even tell Christina.
And this is pre-smartphone?
No, this is smartphone.
Okay.
This is smartphone.
This is your iPhone 1.
This is iPhone. And this is, and I think that's really, that was, take a sticker. Oh. Go.
Someone throw some stickers at that kid.
What is with the Danish character? This America, these would be gone already.
Yeah, they're all. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Valiant effort. No, the fact that it's funny because I take thousands of photographs. Like my Instagram is like 4,000 photographs because I've still kind of kept this as a game for myself. And I think I do think it's having a capture and dissemination device on me at all times, so I could kind of do it by myself, and the kind of private spaces you can get into with the cell phone that you can't with a DSLR or even like
the immediacy of it.
Yeah, and like no one's paying attention to you, you know what I mean? Although I do get funny looks because I'm often like taking pictures of something like ridiculous. Yeah,
but nowadays everybody,
Well, right.
They could also be just looking at Twitter,
Right. So that I had kind of built up a sort of strange body of photography, and that
makes me want to
party down here. Thank you. So what I had applied to school with was essentially those photographs, because I had kind of started to take them seriously and started to through that process take myself seriously. And
dangerous thinking.
I know. But it's like you have that one little day where you're like, these aren't bad.
Yeah, you're like, I see something.
These aren't bad.
Yeah.
These are okay. These are, and then like it just took one friend to kind of just be like, do you want to get an MFA? And kind of push me over the ledge. Yeah, I was just waiting for permission.
Right. Well, that's that Michigan thing, right?
That's very Midwestern. Yeah.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. Oh, me? Me?
But I mean, it seems like, now I jump into the picture much later here, but out of the little research digging I've tried to do, your Instagram is really tough to get to the bottom of, because it's a long one.
It's a long one, and I'm not going to spoil it, but everyone should try to scroll to the front.
Because there's something amazing there.
It's not amazing, but it was what my friend dared me to make the first photograph, and it is exactly the first photograph.
I have to look, you jerk.
And I did realize that if
that's good marketing.
Just start
really good marketing.
Working the thumb out.
But I was trying to get to I think I jumped on right when you were finishing your degree, which is pretty recently, correct?
2018.
Right.
Yeah.
So at that point, I saw a lot of concrete.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I saw a lot of kind of like heavy things, a lot of sculpture, and then weird vinyl printouts and stuff.
Okay.
So this is me just coming out of the blue, right? So, but that just, I'm interested in the process of going from a Tumblr to a pile of concrete rubble in the corner of your studio, and how that develops.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question, and the through line is I think the photography is more often than not an exploration of a built environment, of the graphic life of a street. The photography, like I have a kind of love-hate relationship with Los Angeles because I'm trying to live in it as a pedestrian. I don't own a car, and I'm kind of trying to force,
which is pretty ballsy. Pretty ballsy.
It just, you know, like I had an almost 3-hour commute to work sometimes, like, and I would get on this bus and just sit there and kind of see that the city and why it didn't work the way I wanted it to work. But what ended up happening, and I'd be like jacked on 1,000 cups of coffee because I would just sit there on this hour-long bus, and it was the Venice line, which for people who aren't from Los Angeles, it's a great street because it cuts through many different areas. You can kind of see the graphic life and the built life of many different neighborhoods. And the bus would kind of give me this picture window that I would kind of just get to study and kind of pick apart. And part of my kind of like, part of the photography project came with like, well, what is so aggravating to me about this landscape? Like, what do I find so ugly yet intriguing, and you know, what story is the architecture telling, and then the applied graphics telling? You know, what materials? You know, the banners to me are super fascinating, and to me that's a really symptomatic feature of LA architecture, because the economy, like we've seen lots of, like you'll see lots of stores like churn through, especially downtown where I live, and to me the banner, like a lot of stores will open up, but they won't put a sign. They'll put a banner up. They'll stretch the banner of their store over the old sign. And to me, it kind of acknowledges the kind of transience of like, we may not be here tomorrow. And like a lot of times, like they'll collapse and they kind of like have this weird poetic kind of decay going
Flopping
on,
in the wind,
floppiness. And it kind of, it's like this kind of devaluation of physical space. Like I feel like in the, you know, and of course this is like an American dream thing, but you'd like plant your flag, you'd make your family store, and you're going to be there for generations and pass it down to your children. Like a lot of store frontage now in Los Angeles is like obviously fly by night, you know, and investing in a sign seems like tempting fate almost or whatever. So like trying to figure out like why so many stores in Los Angeles wrap themselves in banners and graphics instead of, you know, making signage or doing something more compelling or aesthetic, you know, and just going like, oh, it's because they might not be there tomorrow, or this is like a check cashing place or something. You know, it's like an economy based on insecurity.
Our customers don't give a fuck about what kind of sign we have.
Well, they don't give a fuck. I mean, you know, and it's part of the sort of strange allure of the graphic life of Los Angeles because it's so layered. Like I've been doing just huge monster walks through Copenhagen, and there is some interesting graphic life here. But it's not like layers on layers, where it's like a sign that used to exist and now a banner's on it, and that's collapsing, and then there's a graph. You know, there's not the history of 3 stores in necessarily. Although I do really like the gambling halls; those are my favorite, with the dice that stick out and the flags where they fringe the flags.
They're really something else, and people just ignore them.
Oh, I love the gambling halls are good, and also all of the butchers with like a pixelated hunk of meat on a gradient background.
You know, they like blow up a picture from the website.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's just like pixelated. Yeah, really. Just so it's so much going on in those. Like just yeah. So there's not that there isn't graphic life here, but it's just like you know, it would be really deep.
It's unique
Flags.
to something else, or unique to a mentality of a city almost.
Right, exactly. And so how I got to like maybe the concrete structure you're talking, like I had done I got interested in the idea of a ruin, like what a ruin was, and the perhaps the concrete piece you're talking about, was that the one where I'd arranged the cinder blocks? Is that maybe?
You know, I really wish I could tell you more. It's just this Instagram flying through it. I believe it was when you were moving out of your studio.
Oh, all of the concrete
rubble.
That exactly was this piece. So what I had done is, you know, thinking about the way things are built in Los Angeles, which is built to be demolished. You know, they're not the Acropolis. They're not.
It's going to burn down in a riot anyway.
It's going to burn down in a riot. Be shooken off by the earth. The earth is going to shake us off its back. But it's whether it's the economy. Like things are built in a way that almost acknowledge they're built in a way to be easily disposable. You know, they're. I mean, and this isn't just Los Angeles. It's just that I went back home to Michigan and saw the same thing. It's kind of an American thing now, where they're building these kind of mid-level shit boxes, basically made out of plywood and cinder blocks, like a standard unit. And so the idea of that piece was to try to arrange what I had done is to it's not on my website anymore, but to explain it, is I had taken the cinder blocks and just kind of gone out in the back of the studio and smashed them. And what I would do is I kind of would arrange them to their, however they didn't, it wasn't like a rules or a game, but I would arrange them to whatever the pieces were. Like if it was an elbow, I would put it next to an elbow and kind of slowly made this pattern that branched out into the studio. And then and so it kind of had a horizon. It kind of looked to me like, you know, pictures of Aleppo or something, or Dresden or something. Like it looked like a ruin, like a model of a ruin. And then I kind of lit it with a spotlight, because I'm also interested in kind of museological display and how you signify historicity and things like that. And a lot of times that's done through display. Like if you just put a bunch of pottery on a plinth, it's not a museum until it's lit, you know, like ancient, you know, then it's from the past.
Don't forget the fiberglass, creek bed.
Exactly. Well, those are all like, I went to the British Museum and I was in ignoring all the colonial nightmare stuff going on there. Like the sort of stagecraft going on in that place was so amazing and nutritious. But so that the idea was to try to physicalize, to make a sculpture that carried with it the idea of a ruinless place, of a place that would not be ruin, and to try to signify it as a ruin out of this kind of disposable material, if that makes sense, through its display and you know, and eventually it was actually ended up making really great bookends that I gave to my professors out of the cinder blocks. So
there's nothing like having art that actually becomes useful.
I just went right to kitsch.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting to see that through line between taking pictures of an architecture and going over to like almost forensic architecture and this sort of like.
That's a great way to put it. I'm gonna steal that. Yeah.
I mean, because as a photographer, I've been very interested in forensic architecture and what that means, and forensic photography of architecture, you know, and that goes straight back to Google Earth and pictures of Israeli occupations and all sorts of weird, like how the human landscape bears the signs of trauma, et cetera,
right.
You know, which is maybe not the best bridge to this exhibition.
Well, we can get here. We can get here. I mean, you know, this is probably like, this exhibition is like 2 or 3 or 4 projects out where I had started to kind of still think about, you know, standards and things like that. To me, that was like taking up museological display in the museum. I had actually just gone in Mexico City to the Anthropology Museum there, which was a huge influence. And that's all lit like a magical history land.
Wonderland, yeah.
It's really amazing. And everyone should go if they go to Mexico City. But I've always kind of been interested in, you know, to me, it's like that standard unit, that cinder block was an essential part of
the Lego block of the real world.
The Lego block of the real world, exactly. So from there, I've done more projects where I took up standards. The last show I did in Los Angeles, you know, I took up the kind of standard drop ceiling, which in America is very prevalent. It's a kind of very 50s and 60s like modernist solution to a ceiling. And the
one where you built lights in and everything.
Yeah, it's a drop ceiling. I guess if you Google drop ceiling, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I was going to say
Google.
Well, I was going to Google. I was going to say like I I just keep thinking of the movie All the President's Men. There's like all the scenes in the New York Times office is a really amazing drop ceiling. But so what I'd done is I'd taken the ceiling plane and sort of bent it to the ground so it crossed to the ground. And the idea was to kind of just make one move within a standard and kind of raise the pressure in the room. I crossed a door line, which ended up causing all sorts of problems with like fire code from the gallery, which was really nice for me. Right. Bad for them.
Crossing fire code is always a good art piece.
But it just doing this one thing brought out all these things and also like brought the ceiling closer so people could smell it. I'm really interested like I in the quality of light. Like I actually banked the lights down so they were in your face, and like that's really interesting to me when like I'm not interested necessarily in like phenomenology like light and space, but I am interested when it becomes like signifying, when like the smell of like you're like, oh, where have I smelled this sort of like outgassing toxic material before? It's like, oh, at the dentist office, or at the in school or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that was a big part of that project. So I don't know if that gives you anything else to get to this project.
Well, in a way, I mean, for me, this project here is very forensic too.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to plow into my reading of it, which is I'm not here to be a critic, but like I had a very visceral reaction to it because I have recently become a father. So I very much reacted to these home movies you have. Yeah. These childhood ephemera.
Yeah.
Detritus, maybe you could even call it.
I like that. I'll take it.
Stickers, just all this stuff, because now I'm seeing it from a whole different angle.
Right.
And that, just these videos really kind of like, oh my God, everything's different. Everything's the same. And, really, and so my big question that came up immediately is, where are you in all this?
Well, I mean, where am I? Where is my art practice, or where's
Nathan? Where's Nathan?
Well, let me back up and describe so what this is when I first began talking to C4, the brief was kind of on the topic of intimacy. And there were two things that I'd been trying to figure out what to make work out of for a long time. One is kind of my interest in standardized spaces, and I'd fortunately because it's all fine, but unfortunately had the occasion to be in a lot of hospital waiting rooms over the past couple of years, and think about these kind of standardized spaces, how they're generic and kind of intensely personal, and yet they're designed so everyone kind of keeps in their own bubble, kind of keeps to themselves. But there's, in some cases, life or death. There's sickness. There's kind of the bodily and emotional stakes, I guess, are high in that kind of space.
Right. You're not hanging out at the hospital because you like the room.
Because you like the room, and the decoration is always so. And especially, and I'm, of course, coming at this from an American place, which is much different as I started to do research to the Danish standard. But the decoration is usually very placid.
I'd say it's about the same here.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, and we can talk about it later, but the difference is in, let's say, the quality of the furniture.
That's because Danes will not accept a lower level.
Well, I mean, and we can talk, this project ended up being a lot more austere than I thought it would be, but I think I was just kind of reacting to, like, it would, but let me continue. So what the second thing is there was a time in my mid-20s when I ended up back in Michigan, kind of in an inflection point, and my folks were splitting up, and which is not essential backstory, but it's the idea is that even before this, when I was younger than that, I had the way that I think a lot of American homes are like this, and maybe Dane, there's this kind of basement storage area that had kind of collected just kind of nostalgic ephemera from our lives, and toys, and I would just be amazed, and when I was younger, this room was kind of like a kind of semi-scary wonder room. Like I knew if I dug deep enough, like I might find a Playboy, or like, you know, like, but then
stuff.
also like, you know, toys from childhood that I didn't remember, and you know, their clothes from when they were, you know, my parents' lives before I existed. And so it became this kind of weird archaeological site that I would go down and kind of pick through as like a personal whatever. But so and then there started to be a time when I started to take pictures of that, when early digital cameras, you know, like this picture I took when I was maybe 24 or something.
Because it was so fascinating.
Yeah,
both on a personal and
I would just pull them
level.
out, and it's funny because it even felt like illicit at the time. I felt like I was going to get caught, you know, just taking snaps, and I ended up.
But this is somebody's stuff.
This is somebody's stuff, and even though it was my family stuff, it didn't feel like mine. You know, it felt like somebody else's story that I was related to.
I think it's about in your 20s where you realize your parents had a whole different life. It had nothing to do with you.
Oh yeah, exactly.
But I mean, my mom threw a bunch of stuff out from the garage, and I had to photograph it before I went to the dump.
Well, not everybody's nostalgic, and my mother is exceptionally nostalgic and writes notes on every photograph, and
that's tremendous.
I mean, it's tough because sometimes it can be a little overwhelming because every object has a story, like sentiment, which is kind of sweet and commendable. But I mean, that's also kind of what this project is kind of for me working through. I don't know if that comes through here because it's kind of austere. It's kind of like, but
that's why I ask about you, because I read so intensely personally into it. Yeah. But the way it's set up is
right.
Also with a certain distance. So if you have a distance to the material, but the material is intensely personal at the same time. Right.
And so I guess maybe I didn't cross the two, get where those two interests overlap. And for the listeners, what this is that this is, I've set up what is kind of a stylized version of a professional or doctor's office waiting room.
And I'll just say, we're going to put pictures of it on the website.
Okay, cool.
So you can go in and see what we're talking about.
Right. That's great. And what it is that I kind of took it as a format, as a way to process this material with some distance, because I think it's not interesting for me to, I think, show up with just a pile of ephemera and things from my life. And
it's tricky.
It's tricky.
In our world, it's tricky.
It's tricky. It's tricky to utilize. I mean, this is, it's tricky for a lot of reasons, but I was trying to use it as a way of interpreting. So in this waiting room, everywhere there would be a sort of generic place for generic content, like the TV on the wall that would just have CNN blaring, or the photographs on the wall that would just be like a landscape or something. They're pictures.
An oil pastel.
Exactly. Or the children's area, there's a children's area always, and the children's area is these stickers, these photographs I made of these toys that I grew up with. So the idea was to kind of translate through photography or stickers to kind of transmogrify these objects into another kind of carrier. And of course, I have a children's stool from IKEA, which is great. There was at the opening, there was a kid here and went straight for it, and I felt like that was like the total validation. Yeah. She should be here right now.
Yeah,
she made the show, but just that she understood what this was, and like the scale was right for that was like totally. I love that.
Yeah,
and proved kind of felt like I got the format right. And so the distance is just so that there's like a layer of remove, a layer of analyzing, and a way for there to be some sort of anthropological, like obviously, people won't know necessarily what these photographs are of like the Midwestern house and the kind of basement.
Well, that's especially the thing, because my mother's from the Midwest, so yeah. I get it.
Okay.
To a degree.
Right.
I didn't grow up there, but I visited the house she grew up in Kankakee, Illinois.
Yeah.
But I don't think Danes would necessarily get the very Midwesternness of it.
Yeah, the wood paneling, the fake.
I mean, it's me mixing my own life into.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, it would be really interesting to do this project in America and or in the Midwest, where I think it would come off very differently. And the waiting room as a format would be different, because again, the furniture and the appointments would not be Eames, whatever. It would be, it's just a totally different set of signifiers here. I mean, because
yes and no. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still universal to that degree, but you're right. It reads slightly differently. But we're hypersensitive to that.
that's true. But I just still think like this would be like a fancy waiting room. And like, and all the Googling I did, it was like Eames chair. And it was like, there was this one, I wish I'd found the name out of it. I can't remember it. There's this one Danish design chair that I saw everywhere. And, and it's Arne Jacobsen.
Probably.
To the crowd.
At least that's a pretty common one.
To the crowd.
Yeah.
So what I had found is that, and was fascinating, it was kind of part of the original pitch for this, although I'm not really a researcher, was a kind of way to take this kind of Danish standard of design, which to me again was not working in my comfort zone. Like if I was to set up a standardized generic space through my American lens, like there'd be carpet, there'd be like that shitty Berber carpet. There'd be a hang in there kitten. Probably. There'd be like dream catchers.
No, I don't think I've seen a dream catcher in a waiting room, but there should be.
Or like, like, I don't know. Faux wood.
Faux wood is big.
Faux wood and big padded. We can just describe a room you've never seen.
We got an hour. Let's do this. No, but I mean, I find it interesting, that blend. You kind of earlier said you didn't know if you made that connection, but in my mind, you absolutely made this connection between something so intensely personal. Again, I go back to the video here.
Yeah.
Just watching the video of you. These are home videos, and they're just amazing because in this context and the camera work and the B-roll or, whatever you want to say is just like, it couldn't be more poignant if you'd stood behind them and been like, you got to do this, you got to do that. It really kind of cut deeply for me, but I'm also from the photography world. And I said, I'm recently become a father, but like, that's the one that really just like transfixed me. I sat and watched it through the whole time during the opening. Because it is so tender, these family videos, right? Your parents had no conception of this exhibition when they made those videos.
No.
And then recognizing your little face.
Yeah.
Just seeing that and the out of focus. Oh, I got to focus the camera, and there's your mom, and opening Christmas presents on camera, which is really just about the most awkward thing you can imagine. But that's pretty 70s, 80s ish. Like.
I mean, they were recording. I mean, like I think there's so much in there, and that's the other thing where trying to have some distance was really tough because a lot of this material was really hard for me to process. Like I went through different stages of like regret and grief, and some of this stuff was really hard for me to have enough distance to like edit and to think about what is an archetype, and also to think about like right now on cameras this is before everyone had a cell phone camera. So and I think they were one of the first amongst their friends to have a VHS, like a video.
One of those motherfucker huge, full on video VCR tape.
And a lot of times they can see themselves on the TV, and that scene I included is they can almost not stop looking at themselves and their awareness of the camera and performing for the camera.
It's like when you talk on Skype and then you're watching,
and then you're watching, you can't help but look into the corner. But this is like even before then. I mean, the way they talk about it, they always, like my mother is always saying, are you taking pictures?
Right.
Like they don't. There's still not the language of. Like my father was a cinephile, and I think wanted to be a filmmaker. I think there's a point that's really poignant for me where he goes like, "Man, I could really get into this video stuff instead of filmmaking," And it's like the dream of filmmaking was still alive for him or whatever. And
right, just scratching at the surface right there for a second.
But there's all this. The language around it was still like films. It wasn't that we were filming ourselves at all times. This was still kind of a. I don't know, not special because they shot so much footage,
But that's actually kind of rare that they shot so much footage at that time.
Yeah, he would just let it run. I mean, my original concept for this video is that it would be an 8-hour video that would run from morning to night for the entire kind of day.
That's wild.
Because there's just that much footage. There's more than that. There's hours.
Yeah, because like my wily uncle had one of those cameras, and I think we have 2 tapes from my entire childhood of him, like when he happened to be there, and it felt like putting it, you know, like throwing it up on his shoulder.
I mean, there's just where he would just let it run. There's like a scene where my mom's carving pumpkins. That's like an hour. It just rolls.
Wow.
You know, so
he's like a Russian filmmaker.
Exactly. Or I keep saying like the, yeah, like exactly. Yeah, he's Tarkovsky. He was if only. I mean, he loved that stuff. So I think this was. I suspect there was some sort of like documentarian aspect flowing through this.
So if we are to speak of the idea of using such intensely personal material, I think of all the horrible art projects that a lot of people have made, and I'm not comparing you to them. What I'm looking for
gotcha.
is
this is the gotcha journalism.
Yeah. Now you're on. No, I'm looking for that bridge, right? Where you actually become mature enough as an artist to deal with things. A good example is I remember when I was in art school, I wanted to do a project about my grandfather who just died. And I came up with some idea. I have it in a notebook somewhere. It was probably, 25% okay. But my teacher was just like, write that down and put it away.
Yeah.
You're not ready.
Yeah.
You know, and like that stuck with me, that idea that you have to, like, just because it's so intensely personal to you doesn't translate to your audience.
Exactly. Oh, I went through the same thing in film school. Yeah.
And it's so hard because part of you wants to be like, fuck the audience, I do what I want. But there's a reality about making art and inviting people in that involves some sort of discussion with art as a greater force. And, also just, things that we learn in art school, essentially. So what do you like? What do you say about dealing with that?
Well, one, I went through the same thing. Like, why don't people find this poignant? Because this is so personal. But it's, I mean, when you use the material, I mean, one, it's just distance. It's knowing that this was something that was interesting, but not knowing what to do with it, but thankfully holding on to it. There's actually more pictures, but because this is like digital, one of the hard drives died. That's a whole other conversation about photography that I'm kind of maybe having in this exhibition as well with the piece back there. But I would say I'd say that's also something I learned in grad school, like without calling anyone out. Like, there was a student who had used,
fuck that guy.
Sweet guy. This sweet guy I'm going to use as an example. But he had used, and he's a good artist too, but he'd used like live birds in his work, but made what I viewed as compromises to the work to accommodate the lives of the bird. And I guess in a funny way, what I realized is that if you're going to use like live birds, you have to be prepared to kill the bird. Like you have to like the material needs to serve the work.
Ladies and gentlemen, MFA education in action.
No, but I mean, if the material is ruling, you know what I mean? Like then don't use live birds.
If it doesn't work all the way, maybe.
Well, and for me, it's like I had to get to that I'm ready to kill this bird moment with this material where I couldn't look at this material. And there was minutes where I was like, I don't know if I can get there, and I still don't know if I really got. I mean, I started editing down. There was more material, and my
probably smart
with the video with this was just editing down because what you want is for people to, one I kind of made rules for myself for the video where if they were addressing the camera directly about the quality of the picture, because there's great scenes of them bickering over the color balance, because my mom was also, was interested in art, and I think she had opinions about the color, she
didn't take it passively.
No. And, so I, these rules were, if they were addressing the nature of filming, if it was kind of an archetypal scene, like a mother and child, or if it was, if these were things that I could include that either played on archetypes or kind of addressed the camera. I mean, there's one scene where, it's just the zoom is loud because it's an old motorized zoom. And it's just like my mother bottle feeding me, and I was going to cut it out because it was so kind of almost too touchy feely. And there was a while where I was just like, no baby stuff, like fuck this baby stuff. But it's just like, it's like, like the machinery is so present.
Yeah, you can just feel the gears turning.
Yeah, and so that was kind of like the kind of some of the rules, or yeah, like, and then it's like I had so many Christmases on tape, but I decided to show my dad's, again, endless rolling of film where he's just walking through the scene, turning on Christmas carols, and it's just kind of a shot of the pregame to Christmas.
It's so static.
Before we had yeah. It's just and that goes on for like, I cut that down. That goes on for like a half an hour.
Dude had a really, really big VCR tape budget.
It was on EP, extended play. It was on I mean, my dad had every single movie ever made.
Wow.
Yeah. He was definitely a cinephile. And that comes in, some of the movies that he taped over.
Right. So he was the guy who also was like, I'm buying that VCR camera.
Oh, well, I mean,
it cost $1,200 for that camera.
I mean, we had cable, really, or like all these sort of things where you could get movies. Like
this is the opposite of my childhood.
Oh, sorry. Man, the TV or music was always on in the house. Yeah, yeah. But anyway.
So where, in terms of like, if we're talking in an overview, in terms of touching on things, you just made this project, which means you've already had a little bit of a mourning period.
Yeah.
Now that you've done it.
Yeah.
And now you're already thinking about the
depression.
next thing, right? Because that's what you do to get over the mourning period.
Yeah.
Where are we in the big picture now?
Oh.
Because, I mean, at this point, we could talk more about...
like a 5-year plan?
Well, I think more about like what worked and what didn't work here, because I had a show last summer and I realized...
Everything worked great.
Oh, thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah. Isn't it obvious? This was a total success. I mean...
it's a process, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And then there's a way of... I'm not talking about like, oh, the printer screwed me. I'm talking about like, this maybe didn't work as well or not. Or, in terms of, because it seems also maybe like this is more of a personal work than you've made before. And whether you'd like to go in this direction or whether this is a side track or where are we at? It's
a personal work in the way that I think, in the same way that even though the office work that I'd done in LA, which is, on my website, is kind of impersonal. It does kind of mirror some work I've done vocationally. Like I didn't install drop ceilings, but I did for a long time, like hang drywall and do kind of work. So I feel like somewhere in a lot of my work where, even when I was in San Diego and you were like, oh, you wasted time. I mean, I had a lot of, you did. I mean, San Diego, so, but, lovely place.
The best people.
The best people. America's finest city, according to their own branding.
In fact.
Yeah, which is, but I did, in the nature of the work that I got to do, like I ended up working for a management company, which is just a company that cleans up, basically rehabs apartments as they're being between renters. And so I had a lot of time to just be alone and think of like, what doorknob, what rent level does this doorknob signify? And why are we using this kind of paint? And what kind of materials go into, because these apartments would be classed, there'd be different levels in different neighborhoods, and different materials would be called for a different situation. So, a lot of my work feels like vocational work. Like when I'm installing a ceiling for art purposes, it still feels like I'm doing it for to make a living, quote unquote. And so even though this is on the face of it, like quite personal, like I still think of it as kind of as making something apparent through difference or whatever. Or I was saying with the rhetoric I was using for the ceiling piece was raising the pressure in the room, like getting, if I make the ceiling plane do something it's not supposed to, then you get into fire codes, like all these, then you get into not blocking a door and pissing off the landlord. You raise the kind of pressure of the room. So with this, like maybe I wish it had been a little more high pressurized in here, but it was still kind of the idea of taking a standard, like a format, like a waiting room, and making it discursive, which is a very grad school way to put it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. But so you're looking more at the contrast. That's really the thing that's kind of.
I mean, I I think one of the things that maybe is tough and maybe, well, not a bridge too far, but I think I was trying to have a lot of different conversations. I think like I was trying to have also a conversation about, I made a publication. I also, instead of, I like to think about the idea of the physicality of a photograph. And I did bring a few kind of quote unquote original photographs, and my anxiety around them, like, oh, I can't lose this, or I hope it doesn't.
Your mom's nostalgia is infecting you.
Well, sure, but but it's also through. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I am her son, but like figuring out how to communicate that. Like, so what I'd done is actually, I'd flipped over the photograph, which had her, which is very too, she described the entire photograph of what it was in writing on the back.
There's a chair on the right-hand side.
Yeah. I mean, it's to the, it's like, it's Nathan and his mommy at the hot air balloon in Battle Creek, Michigan. It's like directly what the scene is, but I kind of loved it because it's in her handwriting. And it's kind of yellowed on the back of the paper, the kind of substrate, because the thing that a digital photograph won't ever do is won't ever age. You know what I mean? And I think that's why early on in Instagram and things like that, like when my friends were having children and taking pictures of their children, they were adding filters because something about it wasn't poignant. It wasn't poignant the way that we knew our childhood photos.
It didn't read like exactly like our childhood. Yeah.
And we knew our childhood photos to have patina, and because the paper and the things were yellowing, and so you look at this photo and you'd be like, oh, it's
even though they weren't that way when they were originally made.
I mean, that was the best.
Got them looking normal.
It's always the technological product, a photograph, and we assign signifiers to it, whether it's the age or the way the grain structure works. Like Kodachrome has a certain feel. So what I really liked, in flipping that photo over was one, having her description. So the scene is now in your mind rather than, trying for me to convince the viewer that I'm just like everybody else and I have a mommy and this is us, and whatever archetypal. I flipped it over. So it's her handwriting, which is almost more personal, describing the scene, and then kind of printed on Access is the kind of like, which kind of spoils the magic of it. It says like, this paper manufactured by Kodak, right, in all caps.
Kodak Gold, yeah, we own you.
Which kind of just kind of punctures the magic of the singularity of this photograph, and my kind of, because I'm like, oh, this is the only one I have of this, and it's like, but it's inherently a copy. It's inherently a technology manufactured by Kodak. And what makes it poignant is, of course, the story. It is, of course, the signifiers of age. And
the funny thing is, you've helped it last longer by turning it around.
Well, right, yeah, exactly.
You've actually protected it from light.
I know. I mean, it's been in a basement in a box. I mean, the proverbial box. The publication, which I should also say, I tried to reproduce the magazine, which the magazines that are in a waiting room. Is the cover is the box. There was like a box of photographs that I found and kind of would dig through and then also add to. Like I would be like,
oh, weird.
Yeah,
I would never do that.
I'd
be like, this is untouchable.
This
isn't for me.
I don't know, dude. I felt compelled. And then the crazy thing was, I have no idea what happened to that box. It disappeared. So
next project, huh?
Yeah, the search for the box. The search for the box.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I kind of thought earlier on when you were talking about all these different angles you've been coming from.
Yeah,
and I think maybe.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry to interrupt. I should also say something important about where the questions of copies is that it's flanked by two office plants or kind of IKEA plants, but what they are is they're faux plants. And the other thing that's true also of photography and any serial object is that it's only portrayed as a serial object if it's faced with its twin. And so in isolation, that plant, even though we might recognize that it's a faux object, it still kind of stands in for the natural. Like it has the signifier of nature.
Right.
And we kind of always take nature as this kind of unrepeatable thing. In the same way that I was kind of like fetishizing this photograph as the only one that ever existed. I mean, there might be the one, I can make more copies, Two, it was definitely one of many. And so in flanking with these kind of repeated industrial objects that, have some variances that have to do with, manufacturing and other things like that. Like I was trying to have a conversation about copies and because I think signifying nature is also a big part in offices to soften them up,
right,
in the waiting room.
So I think, it pulls on a lot of things, and the thing that passed through my mind as we were going through this was that my reaction was intensely personal to me, which is interesting. So I pick up much heavier on certain angles rather than others, and anybody coming through the door might react to something or something else or not at all. Had I seen this video for 2 years ago, I would have been like, oh yeah, family videos, Right. But now it has a much more intense meaning for me.
Sure.
And I think that kind of brings it around to something I think about a lot, which is in, for example, grad school.
Yeah.
In the art world in general, we learn to speak in a certain way.
Yeah,
which
for sure.
Which just kind of, I don't want to say it excludes the general public because I'm not apologetic about art being complex or let's say a little harder to unpack, but requiring
of someone of something.
In that sense. But just the way that we use visual language to communicate, it really I really swing violently between being like, this should be for everybody. Or this is research that we do, which could not reach certain depths without a certain level of complexity.
Yeah, I feel you, man. That's what kept me, I think, really knee-jerk. One, I had a sort of really naive relationship with a politic, I guess, around it, and feeling like it was elitist when I was younger in my 20s, and also that had a lot to do with kind of being defensive about my background, which was middle class, and art seemed so outside of my everyday experience, and the language was part of it. And so I think part of going to grad school was grappling with that language and realizing its value, and still having that sort of
it's hard to. Just go to somewhere and go to a state fair and tell someone you're an artist.
Well, right. Tell your family you're an artist.
Yeah, I got lucky on that one, but exactly. That's where you can see where the rubber hits the road,
Right, and I think that's a challenge. One thing that made me feel good about this, I actually have two anecdotes, and I don't want to go on too long because I think part of it's I do want to talk about LA a little bit, but there's two anecdotes. One is Christina is who I mentioned is an artist, and she's back in California right now, and with her family. It was Easter weekend. I included Easter footage in the
shout out to Easter.
Give a shout out to the Lord. And so her family was like, well, what's Nathan do? Why isn't he here? What's he doing? And she was trying to demur. Oh, he's got an art show. Okay, well, what's the art show? They're
just trying to head him off at the pass at every possible.
Exactly. I don't want to get into this, and it's great how she tells the story. But they're kind of lovely and pushy, and they're like, no, that's not a satisfying answer. They're Italian. Hey, I'm not. They're Italian. So she's like, all right, well, you want to do it? Let's get into it. And so she starts kind of full blown getting into the kind of kind of taking from the press release and, kind of getting into a waiting room has a certain semiotics and a certain relatability, and it's a generic space, and, conflated with this personal material and but how this anecdote ends is actually a happy story. One of her relatives is a charge nurse and is like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. It's such a crazy space and it's so impersonal, but everyone's got a personal story. And and kind of really keyed into it, and and a lot of people kind of really got it. Of course, they're not seeing it. They're here it's again, this is a little more austere than I kind of imagined it. They're imagining American, or they're just what they're imagining is their experience, which I actually really love, and that's kind of the same thing where I wanted to have the photo conjure your own experience.
Yeah,
but so that was actually really great, and that it was gettable to non art humans. And that's the other thing when I was talking about.
Hold on. Non-art humans? Sorry, go on.
Or regulars, normals.
Civilians,
Civilians. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, that I feel like I try to carry through in all my projects. It's kind of what I was saying when, I talk about, I'm interested in the phenomenology of the everyday when it crosses over into which is also like a very art school fucking thing to say. But it's like when the quality of light, signifies or signals some place to you. Like if I can say to like one of my favorite reactions at the opening was I had specifically like mopped the floor. So it smelled kind of antiseptic in here. And somebody said, "Oh, how did you get the waiting room smell?" And I really loved that reaction. And even before today, I kind of like baptized the space. I tried to like
get a little corner,
like with some smell. But to me that or the quality of the light or something like that is important to me. And so that is a way that my work is kind of knowable based on a lived experience. Is not everybody has the same experience, but I don't want you to have special knowledge to approach the work. And that's how I've tried to reconcile the elite, the kind of still within me. I still have that angry 18-year-old knee-jerk faux punk communist in me, and that's how I is like tried to make work that is understandable. But still is based on my art school education, which I think is really at the end of the day indispensable to have that language.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, because you can't come at people with that normally.
Well, that in the world, our world is just what the art world is. Like,
right.
If you go into let's go to your Euro soccer game, there's a certain nomenclature around that.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly. That's very true.
And we forget that because we're constantly having to defend what we do.
Right. Because it's not exactly.
For whatever reason we do.
And isn't this, and I mean, the other side of that isn't this a profession and shouldn't it have its own? I think that's where a lot of this theory.
And the answer is no, get a job.
Get a job.
And that's where we pull the plug.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank you so much. I hope that was good.
And of course, thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music is kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by Cesus. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our sabbatical of a website, culturalbandwidth.com. If you like the show, it would be a huge help if you take the time to leave a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It'll help others find us. Thank you for joining us.